My mic is hot. And we are live. Welcome, lovely audience, back to another episode of Mineyour.biz Monday. I'm your host, Seth Estrada. With me is the ever-effervescent Nicole Grinstead, a.k.a. NerdGirl007. We have with us tonight a very special guest, somebody who you may remember from such classics as The Mighty Ducks 2, and then the lesser well-known, but no less important, First Kid, in which he co-starred with Sinbad. A little bit of throwback to that now with the topic du jour, which is running for the presidency of the United States. In the interim, of course, having run several successful tech startups himself and been, of course, involved in the cryptocurrency scene, and most recently, most visibly, speaking as a keynote speaker at several large-scale events, being instrumental in the formation of the graphene blockchain, which powers such notable projects as EOS and others. I hope I'm not missing too much here, but I'd like to introduce our guest tonight, one Brock Pierce. Brock, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. And in the context of tonight's interview, it means so much that you're being so generous with your time, with all of the other considerations, all the other media requests. Truly, thank you. Nerd Girl, I know you have a stable of questions that you're wanting to ask Brock, and Brock just told us off camera in the green room that he's very committed to transparency and answering a lot of the questions that people have, because this is more than a hot topic. I mean, we've all got skin in the game.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, so you want me to jump right in, Seth? Or
Please
so actually,
do.
Before I really start asking you questions about, early involvement with cryptocurrency, one thing that I'm a little bit just not concerned, but a little bit confused about, and hopefully you can help clarify for me. So residents of Puerto Rico can't vote in a presidential election. Is that right?
That is correct. I am not able to vote for myself, but I am able to run.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. So the inability to vote doesn't stop the ability to run.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. That's unique. Cool. So, all right. So kind of want to jump back in time. I know that you have said that you got involved early with cryptocurrency, with Bitcoin, because you were involved with gaming. But a little bit just wondering how you made that transition. Like, what was the first Bitcoin transaction you ever executed and why? And yeah, some more questions along these lines.
Yeah, so I got into digital currency in the context of online games early on in the late 90s, early 2000s, as the first persistent worlds, think World of Warcraft or Second Life, those came later, but that same concept. And I was a market maker for these in-game currencies, built up a supply chain of about 400,000 people, principally in China, that would play video games professionally to mine digital currency. We were PayPal's largest customer for years. We were instrumental in helping to launch Alipay. And so having been very involved in, call it, the digital currency space in the context of games, anyone that had ideas around secondary markets for affinity point programs and community currencies, they would often come to me in the mid 2000s to have a conversation to see what I thought. And so, crypto and Bitcoin specifically was obviously on my radar from, let's say, very early on. But it wasn't until about 2012 where I started to see a critical mass of activity forming where, I know a little bit about market timing. And so, when asked about Bitcoin, I would say, yeah, Bitcoin or something like it is the future. The question is the future now or 25 years from now? And it was in 2012 where I dropped everything I was doing to work full-time, in this space.
And so is that when you became a founding member of the Bitcoin organization? And can you tell us, kind of what happened that, led to that?
Yeah. So like a lot of people, when first entering the space, most of us start with Bitcoin mining. That's just normally, at least back in the day, that's where you started because you couldn't actually buy Bitcoin at any large scale in 2012 or early 2013. Anyone that's like, oh yeah, I bought a lot of Bitcoin back in 2011 or 12, it's like, probably not true. As someone, that was around and doing these things, if you wanted to invest, $1 million into Bitcoin in even any part of early to mid 2013, you really had to do that through mining and a major mining investment. I mean, it wasn't easy. And so did a lot of that, ended up like buying 10% of the batch one Avalons, or the first ASICs. That probably made me maybe the biggest Bitcoin miner in the world for a moment. Then became the exclusive distributor for KNC Miner into China, anchored a lot of what became Bitfury. And so I was very active in the mining aspect of the industry. And then that led to, I think we were the largest investor in Mastercoin, and I became, founding board member, I think chairman, which was the first ever ICO. Also started founding companies at the time like GoCoin and others that were early payment businesses. I then also co-founded Blockchain Capital, the first ever venture fund in this space, where we funded all the Coinbases and the Krakens and many of the companies that you would know. It wasn't until early 2014 that I got involved with the Bitcoin Foundation. And that was because I was involved in maybe 20 or 25 different crypto businesses. And a lot of people were really frustrated with the Bitcoin Foundation at the time. And they said, well, Brock, if anyone's going to fix it, it's you. So, how about you run for the board, and we'll all vote for you to make sure that you get the industry seat, which is exactly what happened. Unfortunately, I arrived a little too late. The Bitcoin Foundation was already in trouble. They didn't have very good fiscal policy. They needed to act like an endowment, but instead they were, spending everything they were receiving as if, people were going to be continually contributing. That combined with Mt. Gox having its problem, Charlie Shrem getting indicted, it took a big reputational hit. And then in general, we're very focused on decentralization, and people felt the Bitcoin Foundation had too much power over the development of Bitcoin. And so what we did is we transferred the core development to MIT. Is something that we did immediately upon my joining of the board, and some of the transition that occurred. And I mean, we did all the right things. We basically helped decentralize Bitcoin. I'm actually very proud of what we did, considering the resources that we had. And we invested a lot considering what we had in encouraging and teaching developers how to do things. If you weren't around through that period, you probably wouldn't remember the relevancy, but the Bitcoin Foundation was by far the most important organization in crypto back in 2012, 13, and 14. And I think that we succeeded by making it a not very relevant organization. That was really our goal, because that's what the industry wanted, was, to decentralize the development, which was really centralized at the time.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. To decentralize the Bitcoin Foundation. All right, great. So can you tell who are some of the names of the earliest Bitcoiners who you worked with, when you first got involved with the foundation?
Well, I mean, at the Bitcoin Foundation, I mean, the people that mattered is, so Matt Rozak and I started a thing called the Bitcoin Supper Club, which was at all the conferences, the early dinners. And so the founding LPs in Blockchain Capital's Fund 1 was Bobby Lee, who at the time was BTC China, Charlie Lee, worked closely with, Eric Voorhees, Roger Ver. I mean, it was a very tight-knit industry back then. There was probably really only about 100 of us in the world that were on the front lines, building the early applications. I mean, it was a small world. That's not to say there were only 100 people in crypto, but let's say there were 100, call it key influencers, that were the public faces, of the industries, speaking at the conferences, whether it was the John Matonis's and the Gavins. I mean, it was tiny. We all knew each other. And, it's a really wonderful thing to have, seen the industry, expand to the point where there's so many amazing people doing so many amazing things all over the world that there's no possible way to know them all, which is exactly, what you want to see if you hope to see this industry really pull off its big macro philosophical vision.
Yeah. So, as someone who's been around from the beginning and you've seen multiple projects be born, I know that we've talked before about, what crypto maximalism looks like, as religious extremism and problems with crypto tribalism. What do you think are some things that community members can do to sort of help move past this, hindrance?
Well, I mean, I think we have a similar problem in U.S. politics, right? You have this two-party system, which is, creating a lot of division, in our nation. There's this polarization where the left doesn't want to talk to the right and vice versa. And so, we have obviously many more parties or blockchains, right? And cryptos than we do political parties in the US, but it's some of the same issues, right? It's the willingness to treat others with dignity and respect, the willingness to engage in civil discourse. And at the end of that conversation, being able to agree to disagree on things, but having learned from each other, right? We're all on the front lines of innovation, hopefully trying to make the world a better place. And if anyone succeeds, we all win. And so we should all be, learning from each other, and that may result in us having different approaches to what and how we do things. But I think those conversations are important, and whether it be, in the, call it crypto and blockchain space, or, exactly what we have here in our U.S. partisan political world that feels very divided.
I've got a quick question for you. I'm going to just jump in really fast here. Brock, the background that's just behind you, you look like you're on the set of Hamilton. Where in the world are you?
I'm in Washington, D.C., in my new house here. It's called the Pierce School.
Not the Franklin Pierce School.
Yes. It was named after Franklin Pierce, the 14th president of the United States. And so I bought this home about a week and a half ago, of Dwight Howard, the basketball player from the Wizards that got transferred to the Lakers. And so it's the largest apartment or penthouse in Washington, D.C. It's a little over 10,000 square feet. It was built in 1894. And this is my new house in Capitol Hill to entertain and bring people together. I can drop a link in here at some point for you if you want to see it. It's a magical place.
it appears to be so. Obviously, I don't think you're going to go you're not going to dive headfirst into a reno. You're going to let it exude its charm. I'm sure. I hope.
Yeah, well, so I collect a lot of interesting sort of historic properties. I believe in studying the past, and I enjoy the preserving of historical property. And so for this one, it's got all sorts of exposed copper pipes. I mean, it was built in 1894, and so the idea is, I think, to keep because I don't want it to be just totally Victorian. It has to have a little bit of edge. And so I'm thinking kind of like an Edison steampunk Victorian, maintain kind of the property, but give it a little bit of coolness. So if ever you're in Washington, D.C., would love to have you by.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I will take you up on that offer. As soon as I get out and travel, this air quotes, once this whole COVID thing blows over, we'll have $1 for every time we heard that.
Yeah.
Thank you for indulging me. Yeah.
Well, by the way, the good news is in Washington, D.C., there was 0 new COVID cases today. And I think new COVID cases across the country were way down today. So maybe this is the beginning of the end, and where we can start returning to a new normal, an upgraded normal. Now that we've had, I don't know if you saw, but today new data came out that U.S. credit card debt is way down. People have been spending less money. Pollution, obviously, way down because people haven't been driving. There is always a silver lining in all of this. And the thing I hope that we all do, and this being just another reminder for all of us, during this time, where the world is kind of really disrupted, it's an opportunity to look inward, right? And to get your house in order, both figuratively and literally. And it appears that a lot of Americans are doing that when it comes to their credit card debt and otherwise. It's really easy in the course of life just to get caught up in the moment and to not really, take a step back and take a look at your life and say, what are the things that are serving me and what are the things that are not, and what changes would I like to make? And so hopefully we all come out of this better than we were before.
Awesome. Well, it seems like the acquisition of the Pierce School is a bit of a manifestation of that ideology. If I can interpret a little bit, maybe this is where you're going with that gesture.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I'm a storyteller. And so I intend to bring people together in Washington, D.C. from both sides of the political aisle, as well as from, the private sector, academia, bring people together, the media, to engage in, to hold class. Class will be in session, but obviously this is a Socratic school, where we're here to learn from each other. Awesome.
Well, thank you for indulging me, Nicole. Let me bounce it back to you for some of the questions that I know you have that are substantive, and Brock, I'm convinced we're going to ask you some questions you have not been asked yet so far since announcing your candidacy.
All right.
So I actually want to rewind a little bit to when you were a child actor in Hollywood. We mentioned that in the introduction to the show. You've starred in several movies, commercials. What I'm curious about is twofold. With everything that is currently being revealed about the extent of child abuse in Hollywood, this is something that's really important to American voters for the coming election. I sort of want to ask both what your involvement or knowledge of this practice was as a child actor, and then also what your plan would be for the prosecution and punishment of those involved in human trafficking and, child sexual abuse and molestation.
Yeah, so I'm a father of two young girls, and so we need to protect the youth. They are the future. And the idea, I was literally just having a conversation last night with a friend of mine who had went and spent time with survivors and victims in Cambodia. And some of the most horrifying stories I've ever heard in my life. I'm like an eternal optimist. So I have this really positive view of the world, and I like to believe that we all have good intentions. And when I hear some of these stories, it shocks me, because I have a hard time believing that people can really be this sick. And and I've been having more and more conversations with people lately on this subject matter, where I'm hearing from people I know that have actually spent time on the ground and dealing with these issues, and I know it's real. Right. I know that these things are really happening, and it's heartbreaking. And so I'm spending a lot of time behind the scenes working with organizations that are trying to bring an end to this type of activity. Clearly, if I was in political office, I would do everything I can to stop it. As far as being a child actor, I acted from the ages of 3 to 16, and my mother's a minister, and so I was never really left alone. So I never personally experienced any of it, but I do know now, having looked back, that there were multiple predators, hovering around me. And I'm sure if ever there was an opportunity, and I guess thank you to my mother for that not having been the case, I was definitely in a dangerous situation, but fortunate enough that I was never left alone with them.
Can I ask, just as a follow-up, if we were able to arrange some sort of a meeting between you and Tim Ballard, the individual who runs the Operation Underground Railroad? They are, I don't normally engage in activism, but knowing that you're interested in doing something actionable towards preventing human trafficking. Would you be willing to take that meeting?
Yeah, of course. I lived my life in service, and I think protecting the youth and being stewards, custodians of the present world is, what our job is. It's ultimately all about them. They are our future. And hopefully we hand them a world that is one where not only they can survive, but one they can thrive in, and one where hopefully there's a world left for the generations that follow. I mean, that's what this is all about, right? This is our birthright right now, is we are going to inherit the leadership of the earth. And then our job, our duty is to hopefully hand it over better than we found it. And clearly protecting the youth, making sure that, we've educated the youth and left behind a world for them that they can thrive in is our duty.
Awesome. I'll be sure to follow up with you and ensure that a meeting can take place between you and Tim Ballard or the leadership of Operation Underground Railroad. And I will not bring up anybody else's projects for the duration of your interview. But so thank you for humoring me.
Well, but no, I mean, thank you. I mean, this is what this is all about, right? Connecting with, organizations and individuals that, where we can be helpful. Together we rise.
Thank you. So Nicole, she's used to this at this point. I like to riff. She likes to read the music. I like to riff.
No, I appreciate you jumping in sometimes. And yeah, I think it's great. It keeps everything in order. So I want to move forward to some concerns that have been expressed recently by some members of the crypto community regarding the timing of your announcement and run, and whether or not that is somehow related to the scrutiny that Tether and Bitfinex are currently facing. There have been some allegations, from some crypto personalities who have suggested that your run is an attempt to, not be investigated for the duration of the election. And I kind of wanted to bring that up with you.
Yeah. So Tether is one of the many projects that I've worked on and things that I've founded. Tether was my idea, but Craig Sellers had a similar idea, and some of the Bitfinex, team had it. We all ended up collaborating on this project, and so I have zero exposure with Tether. I was never a director or an officer, and I've never made one penny off the business. I gave up all of my equity early on, mostly because I just didn't. I thought this one would be my Achilles heels, and turns out I was probably right. I had one of two choices, which was to maintain control or to relinquish control. And I've got no issues as it relates to Tether. And Tether's been being investigated for a little while. There's nothing. This is not like something new. The idea was, can we put the US dollar on the blockchain, and would there be demand for it? When I was starting the project in 2014, everybody thought it was a horrible idea, because everybody was very like, why would we want fiat money? I go, well, there's still a use for it. But almost literally everybody thought it was a bad idea. And it's doing roughly $10 trillion a year of transactional volume. So I'd say as an idea, it's definitely worked. And like your kids, when they turn 18 and move out of the house, I don't have control over what they do. And sometimes you're really proud of the decisions they make, and sometimes you kind of shake your head going, why did you do that? And Tether is one of those sort of things for me. But I have absolutely nothing to hide, and happy to talk to the media about this project and anyone else whenever they like.
Yeah, so you and I talked about Tether when we met in Anarchapulco just in February. And I just kind of two questions related to it. So when did you sell or give up your interest in Tether? And then also, it seems like over the last year, you've really been distancing yourself from Tether even more than before, and wondering if you can extrapolate a little bit on why.
Yeah, so nothing's changed. Tether was started in 2014, and I relinquished all of my ownership in 2015. And so I haven't had any involvement in Tether for 5 years or so. And so it's just the reason why you might see me talking about it more is because it's become a bigger topic of conversation, over the course of the last year. But no, nothing has changed. I've been completely disconnected and uninvolved for many years.
Okay. All right. So Seth, are you still there? I can't see you. So
I
I'm
am.
Not sure.
I just I took this
right.
this face for
I don't know
radio
if Seth is there
and
or not.
took it off.
I'll move to another question. Oh, you know what? So one question that Seth wanted to bring up was about Carla Ballard, your running mate, and that is how did you decide to run together?
Hello.
And, hey, there you are.
Apologies. Yeah, I had a little bit of an issue with my webcam. I'm not going to name any 3-letter agencies, but I have my suspicions that for some reason my computer runs really, really slow. It shouldn't. It's way over spec for this. But yeah. Anyway, I apologize. It'll be unnerving because you hear me, but not. There we go. We're back.
You're back.
Yeah.
You're back.
Yes, Carla Ballard. I'm very curious about Carla Ballard. She's such an interesting running mate, and did just a tiniest bit of homework on her, but she seems lovely. She seems absolutely fascinating and like an extremely well-intentioned idealist. But how did you guys? Sounds backhanded. How did you guys meet? How did you decide to start running together?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. And so because I've held many offices in my life, but I've never held a public office, I felt that I needed a running mate with public office experience. But it turns out the system is pretty rigged to prevent third-party candidates from running. And I can tell you, as someone with firsthand experience now, the things, I see the inside of the system and the scaffolding, and I can tell you how it works, from a perspective as someone that knows now. And so I had all these candidates identified. And then the lawyers said, oh, your running mate can't be a registered Democrat or a Republican or having voted for anyone other than an independent in the midterms election, which eliminated every candidate that I had on my list. I'm like, okay, this is a problem. Everyone that I had identified. So we went back to the drawing board and created a list of another 100 candidates, which basically all had to be registered independents or people that had never registered to vote or never voted before. So there ended up being a lot of celebrities in Hollywood on that list. And then I was just sitting there and kind of meditating and looking through the list and looking through the list and looking through the list. And I'm like, just none of this is feeling right. And I'm having all these calls. And then I asked one of my rabbis, I'm not Jewish, but I asked one of my rabbis and a handful of others, I'm like, can you pray? Because I'm just not getting to the answer. And one of them came back and said, yeah, I just got a message in my prayer, Carla Ballard. I'm like, oh, I know Carla. And and so she had been at my house and we had talked about the future of sort of currency. And she had been at the Bretton Woods 75 and she's part of the Summit community, if you're familiar with that group. And so Carla and I jumped on I'm like, let's get on the phone with her right now. And within 5 seconds of getting on the phone, I just knew in my gut that, this was the answer. And I'm like, okay, great. We got there. And it's such a wonderful story. So Carla Ballard is a descendant of Aaron Burr, which in the election, so founding father, and in the year 1800, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied in the election, in the Electoral College vote. And so really interesting sort of storyline there. Her family has held, key cabinet positions in government. So she's got the right amount of sort of like founding father, government family, entrepreneurial, media-centric, well-spoken, independent. She's just an extraordinary candidate for a running mate. Like if I wanted to design a running mate in a lab, I probably would have come up with Carla Ballard. Like if I wanted to design the perfect running mate. And so just so happy that that we were able to figure this out together and that she had the courage, right? It takes a lot of courage to run for this office. Because you're inviting in, people to investigate your life. Every decision you've ever made is going to be put under a microscope. It's it requires a lot of courage. And so really grateful to have Carla as a running mate. And then also, as people in crypto, you probably know Brittany Kaiser. Brittany Kaiser is the campaign manager. She's actually here in the house somewhere with me right now. And so, Brittany obviously is the story behind the great hack. If you haven't seen that movie on Netflix, be sure to check that one out. And she also worked with Caitlin Long in Wyoming and is the one that's been writing all the legislation, the 18 laws that have made Wyoming the capital of crypto and blockchain.
Wow.
And so I pulled Brittany out of political retirement and writing laws to jump back into politics again for this campaign. And what we're attempting to do here is to pull off the greatest hack in political history. Sorry for just taking us on a little tangent, but I think it's worth explaining what we're doing and why. George Washington and John Adams and the founding fathers all warned us. They warned us about the dangers of political parties, and specifically the risk of there being two dominant political parties, and that this could be, maybe their worst nightmare. Like, this was the fear. And somehow we've forgotten that, and we clearly have two dominant political parties that have essentially divided this nation. And so we are focused on breaking the duopoly. And we actually have a strategy. So when we sit down and talk to all these political strategists and advisors and, people, they're like, so, what are you going to do? And, kind of like taking what we're doing.
And it's a reasonable question, right? This is something that a lot of voters certainly think that they're pinned into a corner, that voting one way or another may be, air quotes, throwing away a vote.
Exactly. So. And so this is why you're not throwing away your vote. And this is exactly why we have the ability to really do something enormous. So the first premise that I bring up when having these conversations is, I go, you don't have to win the election to become president. And these top, political people scratch their head. They're like, huh? And I'm like, no, you don't actually have to win the election to become president of the United States. And they're like, how does that work? I go, well, our political system runs off the electoral college vote. And to win the election, you need to win a majority, the key word being majority of the electoral college vote. Meaning, if there was a tie, like in the year 1800, there was no winner. Or if a third party were to win even one state, it becomes possible that no one would win a majority. If a third party were to win 3 states, it becomes likely that no one would win in the election. And all of a sudden they're like, so what happens if no one wins? And I'm like, well, this is why you have to study the Constitution and know about the 12th Amendment. And they're like, so what happens? I go, well, the top 3 candidates that received at least one electoral college vote are then given to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives chooses the president with each state having 1 vote. And they're like, how do you know this stuff? I'm like, well, I'm that sort of guy. I'm not confined by the status quo. I don't operate within the box that is this reality. I'm kind of like, there is no box or there is no spoon. Sure. And I'm a gamer.
Well, it seems also like you've made a career, it seems, then of knowing where there are maybe some loose guidelines and then operating in those margins where there's the opportunity to insert, crank something open and pivot or disrupt. So that's what I think I'm hearing here. You're getting ready to 51% hack the vote.
Yeah, we're looking to pull off the greatest hack in political history and to break the duopoly, to break the 2-party system, and hopefully, to put us back on a path toward independence. That thing that our founding fathers fought so hard for.
Well, we'll come back to some the lens of constitutionality in a moment. I'm sure I'm sure that in this case, we don't normally furnish any kind of questions to our interviewees. In this case, it just seemed like it was the appropriate thing to do. So hopefully you're already prepared for that. But that's brilliant. Thank you for bringing up the 12th Amendment. Thank you for bringing up the Constitution at all in the context. That's for anybody who's watching from across the pond, that document is very important to us here. So much appreciated.
Well, but I also go back to things like the Magna Carta. This is for those of us in this industry. a big part of what we're doing is we're building new systems of governance. When people first start understanding this industry, they tend to focus on the currency sort of component. But what we're doing here is a lot bigger than that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We are building and experimenting with new systems of governance that can ultimately change the way in which we govern each other and the world that we live in. And so if you're going to be building these types of systems, it's important that you understand all of the systems that have gotten us here.
Okay, phenomenal. I know there's an IT architect and somebody who's very pivotal in the proof of work space and who has done some consulting in DC for some time, who's watching live right now. So maybe he'll chime in. But like you said, small world, and it's great to hear you talking about coming up with systems that assist in maybe perfecting the problems of even just measuring right now, measuring anything. It seems like there's a lot of bad data. So hard to make decisions with bad data. But Nicole, I apologize. I interrupted you again. You've got a couple other questions.
No, you really didn't. I mean, I think that we're, almost to the point where it makes sense to talk about, some policy and issue questions. Seth, this is sort of your area. You wanted to talk about the Constitution, the First, Second, Third, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments in particular, in light of current events and future plans. Did you have specific questions?
Yes, I've got specific questions. Though I think they could probably be summed up for brevity's sake. So Brock, so that you can start with that prompt and then tell us a little bit about that. We saw that on the website right now, there's a decided lack of hardline stances on issues, but the air quotes issues that so many presidential candidates that they publish a stance on, they seem to be topics du jour. They seem to be hot button topics. In my opinion, they seem to be pandering, not so much really telling people about what their views of the Constitution or of what their views of the actual powers of the president, the office of the president are. They're, in other words, campaign promises. What I'm much more interested in knowing about is, like, who is Brock Pierce with relationship to the Constitution, and specifically the Bill of Rights, the limitations that are placed upon what can be done to or with the American people. First through the Fifth Amendment, pretty important. And in particular, good grief, you very rarely hear about the Third Amendment because it's been so long since we've had to worry about quartering soldiers in our homes, but it's happened in the last couple of months. It's happened. And here we are in 2020. It's like all the rules, like no holds barred. And so we kind of have to revisit, in my opinion, what is being done both at the state level and at the federal level. And for me personally, as a voter, as somebody of conscience, as somebody who refuses to be placed in the boxes of just, blue versus red, I just want to know, how do you view the Constitution? Where do you view the lines? And specifically the First to the Fifth Amendment, they're pretty darn important in terms of individual liberties and as they affect individuals who choose to make this their home.
Yeah, so we can go through those one by one, but I think it's worth starting and just talking about process and why you don't see a lot of detail, on the site at the moment. We intend to do something novel, something that hasn't really been done, certainly around a presidential platform. And that is, this is an invitation to participate in the development of that platform. In the same way in our industry that we develop stuff in an open source, almost GitHub and type of environment, we intend to crowdsource a lot of this policy, a lot of this platform. So like literally you have the ability, we're about to launch this collaborative environment where you have the ability to edit, comment, discuss, debate these ideas. The idea that our voices all matter, right? And giving everyone a voice. I believe that we're leaving, call it the broadcast era or the broadcast age where the government and the media is talking down to us and telling us what to do, and to some extent, even what to think, right? And the world is changing. We're now entering that collaborative, participatory era or age where like you can actually engage in conversation. and feel like you're participating. And some of us know this, right? We're on the front lines and using these new powers that have been granted to us. Well, then there's still a lot of us that really don't feel like we have a voice and don't feel like our voice counts. And so, I think that that's what's exciting about this. And so first and foremost, this is an invitation to participate. Okay, so we can go through what we want to go through first five.
Please, yeah, the first five amendments in particular. I mean, there's always controversy in the United States. There's always controversy surrounding the Second Amendment. I'm really not trying to get you into a position, where this will come back to haunt you down the line. Not so much as just understand.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I think that my position from what we've discussed already. I'm a big believer in our Constitution and protecting our liberties, right? It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe that our founding fathers were extraordinary men that did a phenomenal job under the circumstances with the tools, that they had. I think that we're essentially in a very similar state today, but where it's not going to just be the men, right? It's going to be all of us. And using these new tools, we have an opportunity to upgrade systems. I believe that, and it's not going to be limited to, just that small group of people that had access. I believe that we are essentially in a very 1776 kind of moment, and where all of us have the ability to participate. Right. It's available to all of us that choose to show up and become part of this collaborative process as we collectively design the future world that we all want to live in. Right. The future is going to happen to us, or it's going to happen with us. And I highly encourage all of us to be part of the process. You do have a say, like you really do. And this is that moment in time where we need to stand up for what we believe in. This is not the time to bite your tongue. This is the time to speak up and speak your truth. So I'd say, from call it a principles perspective, or what are my core values? Truth, being one of them. And with that, within truth would be transparency, right? Sustainability, which I would really describe as, regeneration, right? Sustainability is like the minimal goal of where we need to get to. But we really, unfortunately, we have a lot of making up to do. And so you've got sort of regeneration. I believe in, sort of wellness, and within that category is all the sort of stuff that we need to live better lives. I care about, call it humanity in general. It's not about just some of us. It's about all of us. I mean, even we the people doesn't really mean all the people. We don't have to dive too deep into it, but one document I recommend everyone familiarize yourself with is a document known as the Doctrine of Discovery. When you start thinking about things like inequality and injustice, you look at think of it as the stuff that we see as the symptoms or the leaves right on a tree, but you have to really kind of work your way through the branches to the trunk and ultimately to the roots. And I live in Puerto Rico, and so I spent a lot of time looking, at history and how did we get here, with the conquistadors and Christopher Columbus and, the early settlers in North America, and the impact that we've had on the indigenous people of the Americas, and then eventually, the Africans that were taken over to this not so new world without their consent, and all this sort of stuff, because we have to kind of go back in time and understand how did we get here.
Sure,
right? Because there's truly a process of healing. And so the Doctrine of Discovery is a document that was created in 1493 by the Pope for the conquistadors that said, if you're a white Christian man, everything is yours for the taking. And it's something that people tend not to it's kind of a very important document. I mean, it's the closest thing to original sin, right? That has led us to the world in which we're in. And so I think it's important to really kind of wind back the clock and really go back to the beginning and the root cause to try and work our way forward, from there. And so,
sure. Well, if I may just interrupt really quickly, there are several people sort of they're on the periphery of the cryptocurrency space who would argue that First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights in particular, that they are minority rights. And so we undid a lot of the problems in terms of social inequities by having the Bill of Rights written in such a way that it's taken some time to interpret it correctly, but once properly interpreted, then restores equality. That's why these questions have been so important to me. That's why I didn't want to take up too much of your time because we absolutely value your opinion and absolutely value what you're doing. And we know what you're endeavoring to do here is really, really difficult. So we don't want to take up too much of your time, but I wanted to be very precise.
Let's at least get through one of the amendments specifically, so I'm not dancing around too much of it. And we can start with the First Amendment because I think it's really relevant to everything happening right now, right? As we look at big tech and some of the concerns around big tech censoring free speech. I mean, we're seeing that right now between the president and executive orders in place, because we are seeing Twitter, Facebook, Google potentially censoring, information. And one of the big concerns that we've always had was we didn't want one major media company to control the entire narrative and censor everything. We always knew that was a major concern, but clearly big tech has now consolidated even more of the information that we receive into even fewer hands, which was like not what we thought the internet would do, right? We thought the internet would create broader distribution, and sadly, it's consolidated the flow of information into even fewer hands. And those organizations that historically were protected by the fact that they were platforms and that they were not involved in the censoring or the editing or the publishing of information have now decided that they're going to start to participate. And so I think it's a very real issue. And one of the things that also is relevant to the work that we do in this industry, right? We're trying to build censorship resistant systems that will hopefully enable, more free speech. And so, I imagine we all are in the same industry on the front line. So I would think that we're generally, I think, philosophically aligned and view the world often the same way. So obviously a huge proponent of free speech in terms of guns and things of that nature. I'm from Minnesota. And so I grew up, in a family that hunts. And, in general, I dream of a future where we won't need arms, like where humanity can evolve to a point where we can just really live peacefully. But that isn't the world today. And so,
if I may interject really quickly, that's there's not even a representative sample. There's no real pattern for what we have here anywhere else across the globe. When people say, "Hey, gun control works," look at Australia. It's a non sequitur. Or gun control works. Look at Japan. We kicked their ass with a nuke, and then they're a protectorate of ours now. They never have to use military might again if they don't want to. They're just they're very fundamentally flawed arguments out there against the use of guns today. Again, I apologize for the turn of phrase there, but and I mean, I don't think that was America's proudest moment to have been the first and last ever to use a nuclear weapon against anybody else. Huge point of shame. So sorry for being so glib about that. But just to say that gun control, as many advocates preach it, I just don't think they have the data that can compare to the situation that we have here with over 300 million firearms out in the wild. just from an administrative standpoint, it's an administrative headache. If you did have the green light to recall every dangerous weapon from Americans, how could you even do it? I mean, we'll just go that direction. If, for example, the platform that you're proposing of getting people involved, if the voice of those people tells you, Brock, day one in the office of the president, we want you to take the guns. Day one, how do you even do that?
I don't think that that's the day one issue that there's an easy answer to these things. I think day one is probably federally legalized cannabis.
Decriminalize. Do less harm.
That's an easier one. And it's also one where the debate is over, right? I think that debate is over at this point. And so, obviously these are, the main thing is this is an invitation to participate in an ongoing conversation, right? Like every one of us that chooses to get involved has the ability to actually have a say in a presidential platform. As we, make an attempt, if you choose to get involved, at breaking the two-party system and giving, a political rise to an independence party.
Got it. Okay, so to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, the strongest point of policy that you may be thinking about right now is, I want to say, was it Bernie Sanders that mentioned that that's a day one issue? Okay. Yeah. Which is great.
That was Bernie.
Okay. I think personally, the last cycle, I think we were robbed by not being able to see Rand debate Bernie and see which one of them had the juice to take it all the way. I thought that would have been interesting, at least. Some of us may have been able to vote our conscience at that point. But so day one policy, maybe then just stop making criminals out of nonviolent offenders vis-a-vis cannabis.
That's back to call it a layup of what are the things that on the first day are not controversial, right? And where I think the debate is over, right?
Sure.
Second Amendment, I'm not sure we're going to be. Well, let's see. If you care, please be a part of this conversation, right?
I think there are a lot of people within crypto that do.
Yeah, no, and I think that most of us that are in this space we are definitely we're a live and let live sort of group. We don't believe in use of violence and force generally.
Absolutely.
And the question is, how do we get from where we are today to that future state that we all dream of? And that's the real challenge, and why technology is also so relevant right now. I mean, technology is changing the world. I mean, look at how social media has impacted our democratic process. And as you look at other technologies, whether it be gene editing, AI, quantum computing, the list goes on and on. Our leadership is essentially managing technology through the rearview mirror, rather than having a foresight and vision of how do we navigate the challenging road ahead that is changing the landscape of our jobs and everything. I think that technology is one that it's hard to discuss with call it the average American, and in 3 sentences. The reason why you don't see politicians talk about it, because it's a complex subject matter, but I think it's perhaps the most important of all the issues. We really need leadership that call it has some more digital DNA.
Fair enough. Definitely. Question on that regard, and this is kind of sidestepping the questions of constitutional soundness for different decisions and such. First off, love that you're talking about decriminalizing plants. Thank you. But there are some questions regarding in the chat and within the community, within the cryptocurrency community, regarding privacy coins, coin networks, or cryptocurrency, or even blockchain networks that feature zero knowledge proofs. And this is a bit techy for any audiences that aren't within cryptocurrency, but the Moneros and the Zcashes, the Z coins of the world, I'm not sure if you were an investor within Zcoin. If you are, then now's your time to admit it.
No, for the same reasons that I gave up my equity in Tether, I chose to avoid taking positions in things that could undermine my future ability to run for president.
Got it.
But that doesn't mean that I'm not a fan of that work, right? I'm a believer in privacy. Okay. And here to support it, though that sometimes also means personally making myself as unassailable as possible. And sure. So I've chosen to avoid being on the front line of certain aspects of the industry, though I am a believer in the work that's being done. To make it easier to do the work that I'm attempting to do here now.
Okay, so jumping back in the conversation, you mentioned that the First Amendment is very important because of some of the censorship that is obvious within the tech platform space, or platform perhaps breaking publisher space, depending on what happens in court with some of these entities right now. Apparently, it's sounding pretty definitive that some of these companies are being viewed as monopolies. We might see something happen in the near future that starts to break them up a little bit. I'm
not sure that the stock prices all went up last week, and I'm not sure that our leadership are even asking the right questions. So
agreed there.
I viewed what's happened over the last week as been the markets have basically said, okay, everything looks smooth sailing. Nothing, I did not view this as a major progressive step for how we deal with and how we regulate our big tech companies.
Okay, so jumping back to that First Amendment question, though, and being so actively involved in the space of innovation within blockchain and within tech, as you have been, do we just sidestep these entities and try to innovate something from scratch that then favors either uncensorability or at least people's choice or states' rights? Or how would you frame that? What do we do to overcome some of the problems inherent in the United States and the world regarding the First Amendment and people's freedom of speech and religion?
Yeah, I think that it's not one answer, right? I mean, look at what I'm doing today. I'm running for political office because I believe some of us have to be bridges, and to bridge the old and the new. Some of us are just here to build those new systems that may those parallel systems that may render those old systems obsolete. There's many different roles to play, and I think that we collectively need all of the things to build a brighter future, and a world that we all want to live in.
Okay, great. And jumping back to the question to tie it all together, some people would say that privacy coins, zero knowledge proofs, that lends uncensorability to money, the same way that you would have with cash. Nobody asks you to inspect a $5 note that leaves your hands for traces of cocaine. I guess there's some super high number of the U.S. currency, U.S. cash currency that does have traces of literal cocaine on it, apparently. Nobody ever asks you for that. They just want to make sure it's not counterfeit, which apparently some huge number of it is anyway. Why is it that it seems like legislators, and it seems like regulators, and it seems like even some of the initial innovators in the cryptocurrency space seem intent on deleting that element and that feature within cryptocurrencies? And
it's we generally fear that which we don't understand, right? We fear things that are new, and the way that you conquer fear is with knowledge. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm here in Washington, D.C., and I've been traveling around the world for years and years, talking to governments, talking to regulators. And I think that the work that we've done collectively as a group of having conversations with governments have given us the freedom to get to where we are right now. And because we've addressed a lot of those fear-based sort of potential decisions that people were going to make in haste by showing people that, oh, you don't want to stifle innovation. We're living through the fourth industrial revolution, and how your nation copes through this process will affect its future. And so, it's why we have to continue to create the dialogue and continue to have the conversation. And that's, a big part of what me and others like me are doing. We're bringing these conversations up, and so that decisions are not made too quickly.
Okay. Related to that question, and thank you so much for answering that. I think, to your point, 2020 is moving so fast. I think buying a little bit of time is all almost anyone can ask for right now. So I appreciate you framing it that way. Encryption and encrypted tools like what we're using right now. We've chosen not to use an encrypted channel, but the video chat that we're using right now does feature encrypted channels. In fact, Edward Snowden, this was the video chat platform of his choice when speaking to press. There's some legislation in the works right now that would do away with platforms and tools like these.
So clearly, I'm an investor in many projects that utilize this type of encryption. I've been a founder of many of these things. My partner, Crystal, is working on Sense, which is bringing encrypted messaging. I guess one of the questions I would ask you, and we'll put this on the platform, which is, do you think Edward Snowden should be pardoned?
An unqualified yes.
This is one to come to the platform and let's engage in that sort of conversation, because these are the sorts of things that I think our community is interested in.
Yeah, no, brilliant. It sounds like then perhaps legalize cannabis, pardon Edward Snowden, and is it too? Are we pushing the envelope too far to say maybe some other whistleblowers that don't deserve to do time? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of jump in right
here. Let's have those conversations, and I think for a bunch of us, we care. And this is really the question: is Edward Snowden a villain or a hero? And I'd love to hear from you. I clearly have my opinion, but I'll save this one for. Well, I think you can guess my opinion on these things.
Brilliant. I may have a couple of minimally technical questions about how that conversation will take place towards the end of the interview, and we won't get too geeky, obviously.
I think we only have a few more minutes left.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had an hour blocked out, and we're at an hour and 10 minutes, and there's literally, I work till like 1 a.m. So if we can try and wrap up in the next 5 minutes, that would be ideal. I'm always trying to be as available as I can, and appreciate the opportunity to connect. But we've got 2 more ballots and electors, and 2 more states that we got to wrap up by Wednesday. It's actually a ridiculous amount of work running for president. and when you announce on July 4th, I mean, the amount of signatures and the teams, and I've built startups that have scaled in a very short period of time. I've never seen anything like the speed of which you are hiring on a campaign like this, and scaling up teams on a state-by-state basis, and collecting thousands or tens of thousands of signatures. I mean, it's definitely exciting, and I look forward to eventually kind of sharing this whole process. It is I clearly had never done this before, but it's a wild ride, and we're literally trying to do what most people do in 18 months. We're trying to do in 90 days.
Gosh darn it. Well, Godspeed there. Thank you for your generosity with your time. I'm going to let Nicole ask you her questions.
No, actually, so really just kind of to wrap up, really comes along the lines of the same question, is Edward Snowden a hero or a villain? And I think we've heard both sides of the story. Most of us in cryptocurrency fall on one side, and like you said, everybody knows what that is. One question that I kind of wanted to bring up is what your plan would be if you legalize cannabis and other other natural substances, or decriminalize the possession and sale. What would your plan B for rehabilitating prisoners who have been, sentenced to life terms for nonviolent crimes. And within cryptocurrency, of course, specifically, we often refer to Ross Ulbricht just as like the main, I don't know exactly what the right terms are here.
Yeah, no, I am a donor. I've been donating to an organization called MAPS.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a substantial donor to that organization. I believe that the work that they're doing around PTSD and specifically our veterans, I think this is important work. I think some of the things that we label as medicines look more like drugs, and some of the things that we label as drugs look more like medicines. And, look at our opioid epidemic in this country, right? And so I think that these are important conversations. I'm also an investor in a company called Atai, which does a lot of work around psilocybin and other depression related treatments. And so I'm obviously, I think that's pretty clear where my position is on this stuff. I'm publicly, a donor to these organizations and investors on the front lines trying to find new treatments, specifically for PTSD and depression. And I think that we clearly need criminal justice reform, nonviolent offenders. I mean, yeah, we lock up a whole lot of people that shouldn't be locked up. And what do we do, as we get these people out of prisons, and how do we rehabilitate them? That's going to be challenging because it's not just for people coming out of prisons. I mean, it's back to technology. You've got 3.5 million people that are truck drivers in the country. And because of driverless cars and trucks right now, a lot of those jobs are disappearing, and service jobs and stock pickers and surgeons. I mean, technology is changing the landscape in which we work. Then that combined with COVID and the unemployment rates and numbers that are rocketing, I think that we need to implement something like a universal earned income, which is different from a universal basic income, really in semantics. But the idea is, as an American citizen, that you're earning it. And the question, because the world is changing too rapidly, and I think that we can get there without even giving up more money. Get rid of Social Security. It's a system we already know that's broken. Let's get rid of unemployment. Right? Unemployment creates a perverse incentive where people are like, should I go get a job, but then I'll have to lose my unemployment. You go then get rid of all your sort of welfare systems, add all of that up, just those three pieces, you're already at like $2.5+ trillion a year. So take these broken systems that have misalignment of incentives and figure out how to give people the basic money they need to meet their basic minimum needs. I think that we have to have it. I mean, with the wealth disparity that exists in the country right now, if we don't start addressing this, I mean, we're seeing it with, some of the riots and things. I mean, there's this huge wealth disparity, and it'll end with some sort of violent revolution if we don't find a path forward. And we have the abundance, we have the ability to solve for these problems so that every American, no one in this country is going to starve. Everyone will at least have a basic shelter over, roof over their heads. And we're going to need that as we go through this very transformational phase in our history, again, largely due to technology and otherwise. And I think if done correctly, like, I live to work. I get up every day and I live to serve. It makes me happy. I have purpose. A lot of people work to live. And as technology hopefully eliminates those jobs, as technology is here as a tool to enhance our lives, and people are given the freedom to basically breathe and have their minimum basic needs met, and then from there to pursue happiness, as they can do that, they can start thinking, what do I want to do with my life? Instead of doing things because they have to, but because they want to. I think that if we manage this road ahead correctly, we could end up in another renaissance, where everyone is just really passionate about the things that they're doing because they're doing things because they want to, not because they have to. And I think that if we don't find a way to create that environment, we're going to have a real problem on our hands.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, for being here. Is there anything that you want to say to our audience before you get going?
including where people can find you and how they can get involved?
Brock.vote, right? Come to Brock.vote. That collaborative environment will be live here shortly. You can follow me on Twitter at Brock Pierce, Instagram, YouTube videos, whatever. We will be cranking out a ton of content. A lot of this early work has just been ballots. And we were very late to the game. It's actually it's miraculous how well we're doing in light of the fact that we're doing this on such a short timetable. And I think I've been clear on what the strategy is. We have the potential to really break the two-party system, which I think is we're going to have a lot of fun. This is just the beginning, and happy to continue to connect with you again as this campaign continues to move forward. And I think I made a clear offer. If you make it to DC, we can do something here at the Pierce School.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Being so generous.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Have a wonderful night.
Oh my gosh, Nicole, I'm so jazzed that actually just happened. We're talking to our audience again. I totally jumped into the lobby because I'm totally geeking out. I'm totally fanboying right now.
We're so excited. Yeah, we just interviewed a real U.S. presidential candidate for this year. And what's really that wasn't enough in itself. Next week, we have the Libertarian Party's vice presidential candidate, Adam Kokesh, coming to us live on this show. And we actually have kind of a double episode next week because we also have another guest, and that's Charles Hoskinson, co-founder of Ethereum, or as he would prefer to be remembered, founder of Cardano.
Yes, ma'am. Guys, so many awesome things coming up. Can I ask, before we let our audience go tonight, Nicole, which Mind Your Biz merch item are you wearing tonight?
Glad you asked, Seth. So I'm wearing a Satoshi 2020 shirt. It seemed fitting. I wear one almost every day anyway. I like this one. We've got a bunch of different designs for you to choose from. And, doesn't mean that you have to write Satoshi in on the ballot. It's another symbol of what Brock was talking about, breaking the two-party system.
So cool. Well, guys, thanks so much for being tuned in. Thanks so much for your excellent questions regarding privacy coins for our presidential candidate interviewee. Keep those questions coming. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. If you're not, we don't often ask you in such strong terms. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you have notifications turned on. Make sure you know when we're going live. Biakuas, we will have more great guests just like this. Thank you for your support. We'll see you guys really soon.